Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 48 Now desk. I am digital host AJ Weist, and today I have a very special guest, the one and only Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Hacksaw, how are you doing today?
Well, doing good, brother. But you know, the first thing old Hacksaw has to do is give a big ho. Kind of
That's
fires me
right.
up nowadays. Gets the blood flowing, gets the hair standing up on end.
That's right. Yes, sir. Absolutely. It's great to see you're doing well today. For those who don't know, if you're watching at home right now, you will be at the Rocket City Trash Pandas game tomorrow here in the Rocket City. First, Hacksaw, what do you enjoy most about these kind of events at ballparks?
Well, I do a lot of minor league baseball, minor league hockey, even minor league soccer. Excuse me. But I kind of sweat the minor league baseball because sometimes I have to throw out the first pitch.
That's
And
right.
this poor old arm is broke to pieces. But I tell folks it's like a wrestling event. If you've never been to a minor league ball game, especially like the Rockets, there's something going on. They have contests, they have the mascots, they give away T-shirts, they have old school wrestlers there. They have something for everybody. So it's a fun night out.
That's right, absolutely. And have you happened to have a chance to head out to Toyota Field yet, or is this going to be your first time?
Oh, this will be my first time at Toyota Field, but I've been to Huntsville many times. That's one thing about professional wrestling. We go all over the world. It's amazing the appeal of professional wrestling, especially the golden age guys, Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, Macho Man, Jake the Snake. People just tend to remember that era. And I got to tell you, brother, it's humbling to have so many folks come out to like the ball game. They have the wrestling cards, they have the action figures, to stand in line to get autographs. And they say, "Hey, thank you, Hacksaw." I'm like, "No, no, thank you for the great life for me through wrestling."
Absolutely, yes, sir. And I definitely want to get into talking about those legends that you mentioned, and obviously you being one of them. But first, how does a guy from Glens Falls, New York, end up becoming a professional wrestler? Where did your interest in wrestling originate?
Well, it's been quite a road, that's for sure, my friend. I'm from a small town in upstate New York, but I had a great high school career. My senior year, I won the New York State Heavyweight Wrestling Championship undefeated. My shot put record still stands in my high school today, over 50 years. I'm like, get those kids some Cheerios. And football is my main sport. So I was recruited by Ohio State, Woody Hayes, Paterno at Penn State. But I ended up going to Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas, where just on a fluke I met Fritz von Erich, and he suggested I could try wrestling. But I blew him off. I said, I'll be in the NFL for 10 years. And I just blew off the ad opportunity. I went to the Falcons in 1977, had two knee surgeries. I went up to Canada in 78. I was an offensive guard, dime a dozen. I called Fritz back up, and he gave me the gift of pro wrestling. Because if back then, if you weren't somebody's son or second generation guy, you didn't get in. Now there's wrestling schools everywhere. There's wrestlers all over. Back then, it was a very closed business. So for Fritz to give a complete outsider the opened the business to me was a huge gift.
Yes, sir. And I know in the early 80s you spent time wrestling in Japan. How do you think the Japanese product differed from what was happening in the States at that time?
Well, all over the world it's different. In my 40 years in wrestling, I wrestled every state in the union, every province in Canada, and 30 different countries. Over the world I've wrestled. It's one of our many big markets. Wrestled at the Tokyo Dome in front of 80,000 people and right there in Tokyo. But the folks over there are very much polite. Over here, they yell and cheer. Over there, they can't clap politely. I always joke. I just did a charity event with the NFL guys up in Wyoming last week, and I always ask those guys, I'm like, "World champions, where in the world do you boys go?" Wrestling, we go everywhere.
That's right. That's right. You get to do a lot of traveling for sure with your job. Can you talk a little bit about your big break of landing with the WWF? back in 1987, I believe, and how that whole process unfolded.
Well, you work your way through. Back then, there was a regional company. I've actually seen the whole evolution of wrestling, going from high school gyms and National Guard armies to the Silver Dome, the Superdome, Wembley Stadium, Tokyo Dome. I've seen it go to a worldwide phenomena. But yeah, when I started off, it was a totally different business, and I started off as Big Jim Duggan with short hair and clean shaven, and I wore a long gold bathrobe to the ring and red and black trunks. And there was this long progression. I went from Big Jim, I went from Texas to New York to Hawaii to Georgia to Pensacola to San Antonio territory, and that's where I developed the Hacksaw character. I went to Mid South, which was in Louisiana, Oklahoma, that area. That's where I really developed my character. And then, of course, New York, Vince McMahon was going around to all the small territories, buying up the top talent. And I had an opportunity to go up there and make more money. And of course, it's York's New York. And it was great to go up there and be part of the WWF, the golden age, and wrestle guys. You know, I knocked out Andre the Giant with my 2x4. Boom! I hit the big giant right between the eyes. It was a thrill of a lifetime, you know. At WrestleMania 3, in front of 93,000 people at Pontiac Silverdome, I'm standing in the middle of the ring, waving our flag, going USA, USA. I mean, as a 70-year-old man, I still get a thrill out of that. I get goosebumps.
Absolutely, man. I honestly, I wish I could have been around at that time. I was a little bit too young to
Don't rush it, kid.
remember
You'll be
that,
there soon enough.
that very true. But I know a lot of fans look back on your era as the golden age of wrestling. Why do you think that is?
Well, just the characters. I mean, Hulk Hogan. Nowadays, the kids, I think, are much more professional, much more athletic, you know, but our generation was much more creative. You know, what a lot of people don't realize is how competitive wrestling is. Yeah, wrestling's all fake. I can be a wrestler. It's all phony stuff. It has nothing to do with it being competitive. It's a television show. You understand? And as you know, I say, tell kids there's what, 500 NFL football players. There's 300 NBA basketball players. There's 50 WWE wrestlers. It's a television show. It's more competitive than sports, and it's just not kids from America. You got kids from Japan, Australia, Europe. Everybody wants one of those 40 or 50 spots. And if you're on TV and your ratings drop, boom, you're gone. It's a dog eat dog business. And I love people go, well, you guys are all good friends, aren't you? Oh yeah, we're all real good buddies.
Yes, sir.
It's
Absolutely.
television, you know, Brand.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. It's entertainment. It's a great time. Absolutely.
It's a good
Um,
show. Again, like I tell folks, most folks who are critical of professional wrestling have never been. I say you come to the show, you cheer the good guy, you boo the bad guy, you have a great night, or you go sit in a movie for 3 hours like this. If you
yeah.
haven't been there, check it out. I mean, the costumes, the music, the fireworks, because you compete against the NFL, the NBA for that entertainment dollar. So it's just not two guys out there rolling around. It's a fun night out.
Absolutely. And yeah, you don't knock it until you try it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's so much fun. One person you've mentioned is, of course, Andre the Giant. What do you think made him such a larger than life figure? And what do
Well,
you
he was
recall
larger than
about?
life, brother. I mean,
uh,
nowadays you see a lot of 7 foot guys. Shaquille O'Neal, the Big Show. There's a lot of 7 foot guys. Back in the 70s and 80s, 7'2", 500 pounds, Andre the Giant. He was a and he loved the guys nowadays seem like big proportion men. Nowadays, Andre had that disease. He had kind of like almost midget features. He was so huge. But it was an honor to be in the ring with him. I joke, I'd get on the airplane, I'd be next to a businessman. He said, I had a rough day at the office. I'd be, brother, I just got done with a giant.
Right. I think you had the harder job there for sure.
Yeah. And if anybody saw the movie Princess Bride, which is cool, hey, it's Andre the Brute Squad, but it was the thrill of a lifetime. I won the first ever Royal Rumble, but what I remember most is being a professional wrestler, is having my dad, when I was a kid, he'd bring me and my three sisters. He hardworking guy from upstate New York, once a year or maybe once every 3 years to New York City to see the circus at Madison Square Garden. So to have my pop with me, who was my best man at my wedding, drive up in front of Madison Square Garden, see Hacksaw Jim Duggan versus Andre the Giant on the marquee. It was a thrill of a lifetime. And no matter what profession you're in, you sell out the garden, you sell out the garden. And we had like 22,000 folks packed in there. And Andre beat the hell out of me.
Another thing I want to talk about, Sid Udy passed away recently, and I know you had a match with him while with the Great North Wrestling. What memories do you have with Sid?
Sid was definitely an independent guy. He was one of the most impressive men to ever see. I don't know, 6'7", 6'8", maybe 300 pounds, all cut up. He got an ounce of fat on the guy. He was had a lot of great wrestling techniques. His interview wasn't too good, but he was his own man. And what Sid loved more than anything was softball. And he could be in the middle of a huge angle, and he's like, I got the softball tournament. I'm going to go play softball. So he stuck to his character, and he was such a big star that he could come back anytime he wanted. But he was considered kind of, unreliable. You couldn't use him in a big angle because he'd take off to go play softball. But God bless him. That's what he wanted to do.
Right. And earlier you mentioned Vince McMahon. When it's all said and done, do you think Vince McMahon's legacy, what will that be like? Certainly he's one of the more, I guess you could say, polarizing figures in the business over the years.
Yeah, well, and obviously, I mean, the things that are coming out now, and Vince was never my friend. He was my boss.
Mm-hmm.
I just did a show with this young kids like that. Vince McMahon, he treat us like pieces of meat. I'm like, well, son, what do you think you are? You want a friend? Go buy a puppy. Welcome to the real world, kid. So I always looked at Vince as my boss. And did he treat us well? No. Is he kind of seems to be like a despicable person? Yes, he seems to be very much so. But at 70 years old, I travel the world signing autographs, not from Mid-South, not from WCW, not from WWE, for the WWF. I mean, that was the gold standard of professional wrestling. And at my age, I'm still squeezing the last little bit out of the rag, signing autographs, traveling the world, taking pictures with people. And all they ask about is, well, not all they ask about, but a huge proportion is the WWF days. And that was Vince McMahon. So without Vince McMahon, I don't think I'd be where I am now. And I don't think wrestling would be where it is today. But is he a good person? I don't think so, no.
Right. Talk about getting inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame back in 2011. What did that mean to you?
Well, in whatever profession you're in, it's nice to be recognized by your peers, and of course, it took a while to get in there. Jake was in, I think, before me. Teddy was in there before. And it's tough because all the people are like, hey, Hacksaw, when are they going to put you in the Hall of Fame? When are they going to put you in the Hall of Fame? Well, it's something you have no control over. But to finally be put in by DiBiase in Atlanta was great. Ted DiBiase, as I said before, second generation guy, Jake the Snake, Ted, Kurt Hennig. I learned an awful lot. I wrestled Ted hundreds of times all over the world. And I learned an awful lot from Ted, just how to be in the ring and how to wrestle professionally. Because he was a second generation guy. He was in the ring at 15. I didn't start till I was 25, Mm-hmm. Of course, people say, Hacksaw, what was your favorite move? I kick and punch. I'm not a wrestler. I'm a brawler. I got a 2x4 and a ho.
Absolutely, yes, sir. You mentioned the WWF and the WWE, of course, but you also spent several years in the WCW back in the 90s. What are some of your memories, whether it's good, bad, otherwise, of working for that company?
Well, first it was great. First went down there. I went down there, Hulkster. I get along with Hogan. He gets more heat than anybody, but he's not a bad guy actually, and I get along with Hulkster. But anyway, when he went down there, me with Jimmy Hart, back then you were either in the Hulk Hogan group or the Ric Flair group. I was in the Hulk Hogan group, and we went down to WCW and turned that company around because they were doing shows at Center Stage in Atlanta with very few people there, and then we got to the Monday Night Wars, the highest rated shows on television with WWE and WCW.
Cool. And you've certainly spent your career hitting the road, performing all over the world. What are some of your favorite and maybe least favorite places you've made stops at?
Always like to wrestle close to home. Can you make it back to your own bed is always good. But two good cities that always been really good for me in particular is Houston, Texas, because that's where I really developed the hacksaw character. My character was much more brawly back in Houston. I was younger. By the end of my career, I got pretty silly. I had the tongue and all that going. But in Mid-South, I was chopping meat. So that was Houston was always good, and Boston was always good for me. But I didn't like to go to like the Bahamas. They throw stones at you and stuff.
Really? Wow.
You had to take a police back in the old days. Now you think it's fake? You sign the waiver. You come up here in the ring, and we'll show you if it's fake or not. You had to fight every local tough guy. And the wrestling joke is you're always a phony wrestler until you go to court. When you go to court, brother, it's 10, 20, 30,000. You're like, I'm going to sue you. I'm getting my money's worth. We're not done.
Absolutely.
Now it's good to go out. Even nowadays, as an old timer, I go out with security because you meet 100 people, 99 are always very cool. It's amazing how many folks recognize me, but you'd be surprised how many people like, you want to arm wrestle? I'm like, no, I certainly don't want to arm wrestle.
Hacksaw, what advice would you give to someone maybe looking to break into the wrestling business?
Well, I get a lot of kids that come up to me and with their family, and they go, Hacksaw, you got any advice? And I said, yeah, get golf clubs. That's where the money's at. No, and a lot easier on the body. But no, I tell the young guys to chase your dreams. But remember, you got a better chance of playing in the NBA where there's 500 spots or 300 spots instead of 40 spots in the TV. But chase your dreams. I always say the big superstar nowadays, Daniel Bryan. When I first saw him, I'm like, he ain't going to make it. That's just not going to work. But there's a guy who had the drive, the desire, the work ethic, became a huge star. So chase your dreams, but realize you're bucking the odds trying to get into business.
Very true. If you were to create a Mount Rushmore, say of the best in-ring performers of all time, who would you put on it?
Hogan, Flair for sure, and then below that there's a bunch of guys. Bret Hart. I mean, The Rock. Cena's good. I mean, below Flair and Hogan is a two-man Mount Rushmore.
Very true. Very, very true.
I'd be getting off the plane. People are like, it's Hacksaw Duggan. Hogan's behind me. They're like, get out of the way, Hacksaw.
I also see you have a YouTube show, and on your YouTube channel, you're often in a room with a lot of really cool wrestling memorabilia. What are some of your favorite pieces you have in your collection?
I always like the first action figures that came out. That's a huge deal when you're first, because it was G.I. Joe and Barbie back in the day. That was it. And when WWF came out with the first action figures, that's probably my favorite. Yeah.
Very cool. finally, like when looking back on your entire career, what are some things that you're most proud of? And is there anything you would say you might have done differently looking back at it?
Oh yeah, I've made a lot of mistakes. I got a lot of regrets. I sure do, brother. I mean, too many to mention. Unlike Frank Sinatra, too few to mention. But too many to mention. But I see a lot of the dark side of the ring. I see a lot of all the horror stories of wrestling. The thing I'm most proud about is I've been with my wife for 40 years. I never had to go to rehab for booze or drugs. I put two daughters through college. I do a whole lot of charity work. I think I'm still around, so I think, one of the more successful wrestlers in professional wrestling.
Absolutely. Well, that is all the questions I have for you, Hacksaw. Thank you so much
Well,
for
good. You were
joining in
working
with
me
me
harder than Vince McMahon, young guy. I got to tell you.
Well, thank you.
My
Maybe
pleasure. But before we go, you got to give
yes,
me
sir.
a ho, kid. You ready?
That's right.
Let's go, brother. Ho!
Oh, yes.
That's a good ho.
Yes. Comes. Got to get with the diaphragm right there. Yes, sir. Awesome. Thank you so much. Hacksaw
Thank
Jim
you.
Duggan, everyone, in the Rocket City tomorrow at the Trash Pandas game. Thank you so much, Jim.
See you at the ball game, tough guy.